This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good afternoon, this is Earth Matters on the Bigger Picture and I'm Kelly Anissa. As the fasting month comes to an end and with Raya around the corner, we look back and reflect on what we could have done better when it comes to food wastage. On today's show, we discuss how we can eat and prepare our food responsibly this festive season with Fadli Bakhtiar, who is the Programme Director from EcoKnights. Welcome to the show, Fazli.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off with what constitutes food waste. When is food considered wasted?
Food waste or food loss is food that is discarded or lost uneaten. So food considered wasted is when any potential source of food that has knowingly been discarded or destroyed. So I think the main difference between food loss and food waste is that the food loss is from the production side and the food waste is from the consumption side of the scale.
I see. And, why is it such a common occurrence during the fasting month in particular?
I think we've been talking about this for so long. But if I may, my opinion is number one is because of the cultures and tradition, and of course Malaysia as one of the countries that loves our food so much. And we get excited when we see different kind of food, especially during Ramadan with the Pasar Ramadan culture. And of course, because we haven't eaten for the whole day, so everything just look good at that point, and we tend to buy more than what we actually need. But this doesn't only happen in Malaysia. It happens around the world, especially during Ramadan in the fasting month in other countries and like Middle East. But besides the fasting month, I think generally when it comes to rituals or traditions, we can compare to other festivities. It's something that is really embedded in our culture and our rituals, so it's hard to address that in this sense, yeah.
And do we have any numbers to indicate, the rise in food waste during this time of year, so that we can have like a clearer picture of how serious the issue is?
Well, there are a lot of numbers, and even if different sources with different numbers, but based on some of the sources that we get, especially from the local source, which is from the SW Corp. Malaysians reportedly dispose not less than 3,000 metric tons of food daily that is still fit for consumption, with that amount rising during festive season. So I think in 2018, during Ramadan, SW Corp recorded about 615,000 metric tons of food waste. If the food waste was placed in a single pile, it would stand as tall as 30 KLCC buildings.
So from 3,000 tons, you mentioned to
daily.
So on normal days
On normal days, that is still fit for consumption. That
Right.
is not included the ones that is not fit for consumption.
And do we have any statistics showing the major contributors to food waste in Malaysia? Does it come from restaurants? Is it from markets or, dining halls?
Yeah, so an average, based on, again, a lot of statistics, but based on our programs that we do, household waste usually contribute to about 0.5 kg to almost 1 kg per day in terms of food waste. Of course, it gets increased during Ramadan or during festivities. Restaurant, which is higher, and then the buffet. I think one thing that we indulge ourselves in is the buffet during Ramadan, which contributes to about 270 tons of food leftovers and thrown away. And from bazaar, about 25 to 35% daily come from the bazaar. And this comes from the mentality of trying to prepare as much as possible and make profit as much as possible as well during the bazaar. I think the general data that we get is that when it comes to the food waste in terms of food loss and food waste, 45% of the total food that is wasted globally, 45% comes from the food waste, which is the consumption line, and 55% comes from the food loss, which is the production line. So, well, that's really quite a lot, lah.
Yeah. During the fasting month, bazaars are a big part of the experience, as you've mentioned. As for all Malaysians, it is part of our culture. We see people walking out with lots of bags of food. So tell us about the initiative that EcoKnights had taken during this fasting month to reduce the use of plastic and waste. I understand that you had a campaign going. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure, of course. So for the past 3 years, we have worked in partnership with the River of Life KL, as EcoKnights is one of the partners for the River of Life KL program. And since 2017, we initiated a campaign called the Green Ramadan Campaign, where our goal is to educate the public to reduce waste in general. So the first year was done as a pilot, very small, straightforward. Last year, we started slightly bigger with an improved mechanism where we work in Kampung Baru, Pasar Ramadan Jalan Raja Uda in Kampung Baru. We call it Back to Bekas. So we educate and encourage public to bring their own Tupperware and their own shopping bag instead of using plastics. And then what we do is we distribute free bags and Tupperware. And if they come again to and use these bags, they will get like stamp. And then if they complete like a certain number of stamps, we will give them grocery as part of like a small incentive. So that's one. The second one is called C4C, or cooking oil for cleaning. So what we do is we engage with vendors that sells products or food that uses cooking oil, a lot of cooking oil, like frying food, and we encourage them to participate and give back their used cooking oil. In return, we will give back a new cooking oil for them. So that the used cooking oil will either be disposed properly at the collection center, or secondly, we also use that to convert this used cooking oil into soap, dishwashing soap that can be used again for normal consumption in the kitchen. Yes.
And so what was the response like from people, especially for the Back to Bekas initiative? Were people, were they actually interested? Were they actively engaged with that campaign that you were doing? Or was it difficult for them to just adapt to that green initiative for Ramadan?
Yes, this is interesting because this is the third year and we organized it at 2 locations instead of 1 location last year. This year we organized it at Jalan Raja Alang and Jalan Raja Uda, both in Kampung Baru, nearby each other. And the mechanism is they had to come and answer a simple perception survey and basic understanding on the River of Life program and also waste in general. So I think what's interesting is because I've been there for a few of the days, I volunteered a few of the days, and some of them, I think generally Malaysians are a bit shy. And people come to Bazaar Ramadan straight away to buy food. So when someone approach you and invite you to answer a survey, I think they're a bit timid. But then when we ask the questions and when they answer the survey, we found out that a lot of them actually, or majority, have the awareness of the issues, the waste issues, the plastic issues, and then they also know a little bit about the River of Life programs and the protection of river and pollutions and whatnot. And some of them even say that they have reduced the number of, or they reduced their behavior of using straws and plastic, which is we feel like it's really interesting and good start. But what we feel is that whether they can continue to do it outside of these days because it requires like a continuous momentum
It's
to
a habit.
remind them, number one. But we also have some, old people. I won't say old people, like elderly. That is, that they mentioned that they used to stay in KL for 50, 60 years, and they used to swim in the river in KL, and you can't anymore. It's quite heartbreaking
Right.
to hear that as well. The part where it's a little bit dismissive is, of course, people come, they just want the bag. We ask them to answer a simple survey just to get their ideas or perception, but they don't want to. They feel like either they give excuses, they don't want to answer. They just want the bag. So
Right.
it's still you still have to educate people and have a different kind of approach. But I think it's interesting and very meaningful for the volunteers and for my team, especially those who are the first time doing this, because the engagement was really, really good. Just the opportunity to get close to people and ask them about these issues, these simple matters, reducing food waste, reducing plastic, means a lot to younger generation, because they are the ones who's going to continue this journey and educate people, because the elderly, they are quite fixed to a certain type of culture or mindset.
And yeah, I mean, especially today, I notice among my colleagues and my friends, we tend to bring our own Tupperwares when we buy lunch. Not just during Ramadan, I think during a daily basis. So, especially those who are part of the younger generation.
Yeah.
Whereas for those who are older, I also notice that for them, it's a very alien concept because it's not something that they are
I
used
think
to.
it's strange, right? Because they are the ones who used to introduce this tiffin thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when we went for picnic back then, 20 years ago when we were still young. We go to picnics and the parents always pack in Tupperwares, in tiffins.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a dying culture already. I think it's the age of convenience. Just to, no time to wash, no time to this, you just want to take it, use it, throw it away. Yeah, and it's cheap too. Everything comes free. You buy, you get the free Tupperware as well. So, it doesn't cost anything to consumers, I suppose. Yeah.
And speaking about that, about a couple of weeks ago, Vivi Yusof, the fashion entrepreneur, faced backlash from social media for using too much plastic during an outing to a Ramadan bazaar. She posted a picture on social media, and fans called her out on it. So she then posted an apology for being environmentally unconscious about this issue. So many people condemned her, and some of them said that it isn't her fault and it's not fair to be calling someone out so publicly on social media. What are your thoughts on that? Is shaming really the way to go?
Well, I feel sorry for what happened to her, and just with anyone who's been persecuted in the social media, especially. Shaming is definitely not our way. When I say not our way, not just EcoKnights way, I don't think it's our culture way to shame people. It's just not the right thing to do. That's not how you educate people. Secondly, I think public figure obviously is open to public opinion. It's really unavoidable. They will get condemned whether they do the right thing or whether they do the bad thing. If she decides to say donate a certain amount of money to charity, people will still say something bad. There will still people who say bad things about her, as much as if she did anything that is not pretty or looking good in front of the public. But my point is that during Ramadan is a time for reflection. It's like internal reflection. We're not just fasting to starve ourselves. It's really about reflecting on the things that we do on daily basis. And these people who shame other people during this month obviously have not reflected on themselves and whether they use Tupperware and eco-friendly bag every day. I mean, there's a Malay pepatah. It says, baling batu sorok tangan. So you throw a stone and you hide your hands. So they can say anything they want. But for EcoKnights, we are a moderate organisation. Environmental issues is really a complex thing. So it's not only if someone uses plastic and therefore they are not eco-friendly. It's rooted deeply consumerism. There's a lot of things that needs to be addressed and educated, and that's why I think EcoKnights, we're here to engage with public through our programs to provide this avenue for learning.
I am speaking today to Fadli Bakhtiar. He is the Programme Director of EcoKnights, and we are discussing responsible food habits for Ramadan and Hari Raya. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to Earth Matters on the Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9. Welcome back. This is Earth Matters on the Bigger Picture, and I'm Kelly Anissa. On today's show, we are discussing responsible food habits for Ramadan and Hari Raya. Joining me in the studio is Fadli Bakhtiar. He is the Programme Director of EcoKnights. During the festive period, such as Raya, there are plenty of open houses, and organizations and charities serving food in large amounts for, noble causes.
Yep.
So, but how can we celebrate this Raya with better food responsibility? What kind of practices should be put in place to reduce waste, for example?
Oh, wow. I mean, if it's not because I work for an environmental organization for so long, I think I would have still be in that sort of culture of waste, really, to be frank with you. Because it's just part of our cultural background. Festivities, people are so excited. We are people that is, really welcoming, right? When we organize open house, we want as many people to come, and sometimes we tend to overdoing it for many reasons. Now we have the social media, people like to take photos to look nice on social media, so they tend to overdoing things. So that's one. But I think there are certain things that can be, some measures that can be taken. Number one is obviously we need to have this moderate mentality. You have to be moderate, and maybe do an RSVP, for example. I think some more people now, they kind of like RSVP and check how many people are coming to their open house, for example, so they prepare enough food for it. And we can also prepare food that can last longer, or they can also, in our culture, we usually, when there's people coming and there's food, we can tapao it and then give it to the guests to bring back. So that's also one of the things to reduce, because otherwise, what happens after everybody leaves and you still have this food? You can't manage it. You have to throw it out, because your house can't, or your place can't keep it. So might as well pack it properly and give it away. So that's one. Take say the Princess of Selangor, Tengku Zata, an example. She has done her part with her own motto to say no to plastic, and her heavy involvement in the Kecara Soup Kitchen, where they help recovered food from hotels and places and give it out to the undeserved people. So that's also one of the things. There are a lot of people who can take advantage of this situation of food waste.
So, for example, Ramadan, to reduce plastic waste, like you mentioned, we bring our own Tupperwares, and we use reusable bags. What would be a similar, how can we translate that when it comes to Raya celebration, for example, where we're not really going out, but we're visiting places, and, as, say, the host of a party, besides just RSVPing, like you said, what would be equivalent to reducing the use of plastic?
Yeah, so that's really a problem. A lot of, I mentioned this because it was part of my common practice, back then, before I was educated, if you may. We use all these single-use plastic paper cup, plates, utensils, and we just throw it because it's really convenient. That's why for a few years already, or at least some years, even for my family, when we invite people to come, we use our own utensils, and that's why we don't invite too many people. That's the downside of it. We can't invite too many people, but then we invite those who perhaps closer to us, and we use our own utensils. Or for catering, I think they still use their own plates and they can wash it. Just try to reduce using plastic cups and plates and utensils. That's really one of the things that will kind of like, increase the waste during the festivities.
Do you think food waste can be avoided completely altogether? In some cases, is it simply just unavoidable?
Yeah, I mean, to be completely fair, leftovers cannot be you can't avoid it completely, because there are leftovers that cannot be consumed anymore. For example, during preparation, when you cut the tip of your vegetables or the skin of your chicken and all that, and then after you eat, then there's still bones and there's still parts that you can't consume anymore. So that's still considered as food waste. You can definitely reduce by, it's again and again the same message, which is to produce or to cook or to prepare food that is enough for your consumption. So even after the festivity season, you can still cook something that is enough for you. Like for myself, really, because I consider myself as someone that is not easy to change, because it's again convenience. But then I take few steps. Number one is I start to cook in the amount that I need, or I cook the items that can be frozen again. So, for example, during Ramadan, I cook food for like 3 days, and then I just stuff everything in the freezer. So I keep using it, rotating all the dishes until it's finished. So rather than cook one day and then I cook again, so I save time, I save the food, and I think everybody has refrigerator that they can use to store this food.
And for some cases, is there any way we can make use of spoiled foods like veggies, for example, and fruits? Like so you mentioned, when it comes to cooking oil, you can use it to make soap. But when it comes to other types of food, how can we put it into good use?
Yeah, so like EcoKnights, we have few programs that we initiatives that we run. It's called the G2G. G2G is a program where we educate the public to compose their food waste, or to reduce their food waste, intercept it from being thrown into the landfill, and turn it into compost. And then we have the C4C, I mentioned about the used cooking oil. We also have the eco-enzyme, where we use the fruit peels and turn it into a multi-purpose dishwasher. So these are simple things that you can do. But what I like to highlight to you, Kelly, is that we found out through our programs and through our surveys and feedback that after participants participate in our, say, G2G, the composting garden to garbage to garden program, that the amount that trash that they throw outside reduced from on the daily consumption to about at least once in 2 days. That means instead of throwing it every day daily, because they separate the food waste, and the food waste goes into the bin, the compost bin that we provided or they bought from us, they have reduced the amount of waste that they throw outside that will be collected by the local collector, contractors. So that is already reducing by at least half. So imagine you do multiplication, times per street, times per taman, times per city, the result can be really, really huge.
Right. How can we make, how can you make the process easier for people to participate in this, for them to change their lifestyles? Because, it is a lifestyle change, and it's not something I think that Malaysians are particularly used to yet. So what do you think can improve that perception?
No, I think if I try to reflect back on my personal journey. Of course, I cannot speak for everyone, but I remember when we were younger, our parents always tell us to finish our food. There's a lot of things that if you don't finish the food will cry. We have all this education in the younger age, but then somehow it gets lost in translation because of, again, especially in the city where we are chasing, work, busy life. So to me, I don't see anything really hard in doing it. I think that what is most important is to have a sense of moderation and do not indulge into your wants that much, because we are living in that age. It's not just about food, it's about everything else, fashion, Everything is really a fast-moving lifestyle that is never end, and it has to stop because of what is happening globally.
And when we think about food waste, a lot of us assume that the main concern is for the humanitarian cause, that, wasting food here, whereas there is someone else on the other side of the world starving. So there is that humanitarian factor that we think about. Can you talk a little bit about how this impacts the environment and, how it affects climate change?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the biggest issues around at the moment, food security. For example, landfill. Food waste can cause, if it goes to landfill, it will produce methane that is 20 over times more dangerous and harmful than carbon dioxide. That is really bad for the atmosphere. And of course, the food production uses a lot of resources. We probably don't know this, or probably we know, but we don't see the scale. But they use a lot of water, energy, and resources like crops to feed the animal that can be used for human consumption. Then we consume the animals again.
Right.
And then we waste it. And then the land usage to produce, we have to clear a lot of lands, a lot of forests to produce or to plant or to grow food. And these forests are important for the ecosystem to store the carbon, right? And that's cause global warming. And of course, usage of GMO, pesticides, hormone. These are all bad because number one, it goes into our body. Number one. Secondly, is also like pesticide. It goes into the soil, into the water system, and goes back to not just human but to animals.
Right.
So these are all some of the critical issues that is currently happening.
So is there a country we can emulate as a good example in terms of how they handle their food waste or just waste in general?
Handle the food that can reduce the food waste. Yes, I can give you a couple. One is Turkey. In 2013, they reduced their bread waste. They received full support also from their president. And they succeeded because, Turkey, they're famous with breads, So they reduced bread waste, which resulted in saving of about 2.8 billion lira, or about 1.9 billion ringgit. That's Turkey. And France encourages supermarkets to hand over its unsold food products, both fresh and processed, to the food bank. So the total amount of food donated will be valued and given tax exemption.
I see.
Yeah.
So what is EcoKnights doing to raise more awareness of this issue moving forward? Because I understand that it was a Ramadan campaign, but what happens after Ramadan? How is it an ongoing initiative that you carry on throughout the year?
Yeah, so EcoKnights, our vision is quite simple. Not simple. Our vision is mainstream sustainable practices in Malaysia. So whatever that is not mainstream, we want to try and make it mainstream. So after 15 years of work, we've created a lot of awareness and getting involving different types of people in different type of topics and issues and initiatives. And we have different pillars to run all these activities or programs. But some of the programs that I have mentioned earlier that we organize on the all the time include the Garbage to Garden program, the C4C program, the cooking oil for cleaning program. We have a lot of workshops that we conduct to communities. We also run corporate programs to educate corporate about how they can be more accessible in the office. We also have our volunteer program where we get public or people to come and help us clean rivers that mainly consist of waste from plastics. Yeah, so these are some of the activities. But I think one of the things that we moving forward that I'm really focusing on internally is that we do our internship program. So we continuously recruiting young graduates from different aspects of study, not just environment, to come and do internship at EcoKnights. And they kind of have this intensive training where they learn how to work on different environmental projects. But what's important, after they go out, they can talk about this, not really just as, from a science background. From communication background, we had dentists who did internship, and they all want to have something to do with sustainability in their future. Yeah.
So how can people volunteer for these activities with EcoKnights? Not even for next Ramadan, I mean throughout all these other projects that you're doing, where can people go to register as a volunteer?
Yeah, so they can always check us out on our official websites, ecoKnights.org.my, or our social media, EcoKnights at Facebook, at Instagram, at Twitter. So we update most of our programs on almost daily basis. And we have our volunteer pillar, youth development and volunteerism. But then it's open for different activities even for the next month of Ramadan next year. Now we hope that we can emulate this program, because now we did it in 2 locations. So hopefully next year we can scale up, and because we have the mechanism already, we have the blueprint of how it can be done. Just a matter of having or getting volunteers, different group of volunteers to be trained on how to do it. And then they can do it in their area, so they don't have to come to Kampung Baru all the way to come into the city and run it. And then they can share the data, because the data is important for us to send to the government, especially to say that these are the things that has been done, the kind of initiative. So I think that's really important. We look forward to receive any application of volunteers, public, individuals, corporates, communities, schools, anyone.
So before we end the show, do you have a final message for this year's Raya festivities?
Yes, I do. My message is, let's not add ourselves in the statistics. Be safe traveling, of course. Consume and prepare food moderately. I know we want to support, or we want to appreciate all the guests that comes to our house. Just try and be a bit more moderate. And when you go to other people's house, also do not, take too much of what you cannot consume, because you will throw it out. And just keep this mindful behavior, and extend from just 1 month of Ramadan to 2 months at least, or if you can, continuously throughout the whole year until the next year.
Thank you for that, Fadli. I am speaking to Fadli Bakhtiar. He is the Programme Director of EcoKnights, and we were talking about responsible food habits for Ramadan and Hari Raya. If you've missed any part of this interview, you can download it from the BFM app, or go to our website at bfm.my, or also on Spotify. You're listening to Earth Matters on the Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9.